What's up guys, Marshall Coding here. Today we continue our MEVN Stack application with JWT Authentication. Now let's create a Vue application. In command line, I will move into client folder. To create a Vue app, I will run npm init Vue at latest command. Now it asks for project name. I will name it client. I would like to add TypeScript and also JSX support. And Vue router is also important for our project. I would like to add PNIA for global state management. We don't need unit testing in this project, that's why I will say no. And for this option, we will also say no. We can add ESLint for code quality and the prettier for code formatting. Now our Vue application is created. Now let's see what we got in our project. So I will move into package.json file. We see that we are running Vite for npm serving. And also we have dependencies such as PNIA, Vue router. Inside source folder, we have assets, components, router, stores, views, and app view file. So views folder will contain our pages such as login, register, and user page. Router will contain our routes. Stores folder is used for PNIA, global store management. And components are reusable Vue files that we will use them in multiple pages. And assets will be used for static assets such as images or CSS files. After creating a Vue project, we need to install the packages that we will use in our project. Now, in terminal, I will move into the client folder. And I will run npm I, which stands for npm install. Now our packages are installed into Node modules folder. I would like to start by creating the pages for our application. Inside source folder, we have views folder. And let's create a new folder named Auth. And this Auth folder will contain our login and register, and also user pages. I will create login.vue, register.vue, and user view. We don't need about view, so we can delete it. Now I would like to configure our router. So instead of about page, we will need login page. I will copy this code and create the other pages. Router. And I will remove the comments. Now let's run our application and let's see what we got. But before running our application, I would like to modify app.view. So here I will remove about page router. In terminal, let's run npm run dev. Now we will use this URL to open our application in the browser. Now I'm in browser and we see the initial user interface of our project. Now let's remove all the code we don't need. Inside app file, we don't need any of this code. Now let's move into the home view. And I will also remove components that we don't need. Now I would like to add Bootstrap to our project because I will use its component and utility classes. Let's first stop the localhost. I will run npm install Bootstrap. Bootstrap is installed. Now let's add it to our main.ts file. Now I will enter npm install Bootstrap. Bootstrap is installed. Now let's add it into main.ts file. Here I will remove main.css asset, and instead of it I will add bootstrap/this/css/bootstrap.css. I would like to create a navigation menu. So let's create a Navbar file under components folder. I will use Bootstrap Navbar. So in the Bootstrap web page you can find this code. I will copy and paste it. In order not to get any ESLint error like this, let's rename our component as a Navbar, but with uppercase B. Now I will remove some of the code from here and I will design it according to our project. Now let's import this file into app. Now let's run the application and see what we have got. We see that our Navbar exists with the routes, and we are inside homepage right now. And when we try to go to another page, it says at least one template or script is required in single file. We have this error because our authentication pages are empty. Now let's fill those pages as well. Now I'm inside login view and let's create a template. Let's copy this code and paste it to other views as well. Let's run our application again. Now let's refresh our page and go into login page. We see that we are in login page right now. Now we move into register page. Now when we click to the user dropdown, we see that it doesn't work. This is because inside main.ts file, we need to import Bootstrap. So by this import, the Bootstrap scripts will also work. Now we see that our dropdown works, but it is a little bit ugly. Inside Navbar file, let's change the order of components. Now we see that it looks fine. When we click to username, we go to the user page. And when we click to logout button, nothing works. Nothing will happen. Okay, now let's build the login and register pages. I will create a form and I will use Bootstrap default form styles. And I will use Bootstrap form components that exist in the website. I will copy this code and paste it here. Now let's modify the codes. Now let's see how our form looks like. It seems that we need a little bit margin from the top. So I will add custom CSS. Now our form looks better. Let's copy this code and paste it into register view as well. We will need username and confirm password fields as well. Let's see what our register page looks like. Okay, it seems fine. Now let's build the user page. I will copy this code again and paste it to user page. We can remove the form. Now our user page is also ready. Here, let's write some example username and email. Now this is how our user page will look like if we get the real data from database. Let's add first name and last name fields as well. For now, our user page is ready. Now I would like to work with global state management. For that purpose, we're using Pinia as a package. To use Pinia inside stores folder, let's create a file named Auth.ts. Here we will create our store to fetch and store authenticated user. Let's import Pinia. And now let's create an Auth store. So usually with the Pinia package, the naming convention is like this. We have to use, after that where we will write the store name and then store. And it is better that our store name is somehow related to the name inside define store method. So in both cases we are using Auth. Inside the store we can have 3 objects. So first of all, we need state, we need getters, and we need actions. So state is used to store the data, and getters is used to a little bit format the state data if we want, and actions are used to either get, and actions are used to modify the state, the data inside the state. Let's create some state. So I will create a user state which holds the user data. And I will create 2 getters. The first getter will return user data. And the second getter will return a boolean indicating whether the user is authenticated or not. To get if the user is authenticated, I will use ID field. So if ID field exists, we will return true. Else we will return false. Now let's define actions. So we need 3 actions. So we need first login action, and it should be async because we will use backend requests, because we will use API requests in this action. We also need register action. Another action will be getUser, which will get user data from backend. We also need an action for logout. And refresh token. Now let's create a user model. This user model will represent our state user. We need ID field, which is going to be a number. We also need username and email, as well as first name and last name. And I will use this interface as a model for user state. Let's also create a model for whole state. Now I would like to create a composable for our API requests. So inside source folder, let's create a folder named composables. Inside composables, I will create use API. So this composable will be used for request and response handling. In our application, we are using Axios as a REST API handler. So in this composable, we will also use Axios. But before creating a composable, I will create another folder inside source folder named utils. Inside utils, I will create an Axios file. So this Axios file will contain basic configuration for our Axios package in order to create a composable. Let's first import Axios. Let's first install Axios. I will say npm install Axios. Now Axios is installed, let's import it. I will create an Axios instance. So base URL is our API endpoint for backend. With credentials true will be used to send HTTP-only cookies to the backend. And our header configuration will contain content type application JSON in order to be able to work with JSON data. I would like to get our base URL from environmental variables. So we will tell folder I will create .env file. Inside .env file, I will create API URI. But I have to add with as a prefix to API URI, because if we don't add with, we will not be able to use it. If we remember from our previous tutorial, the URI of our API backend was HTTP localhost with 3500 port number. Now we're back into Axios file. Here I will write import.meta.env and our environmental variable name. Now I will use this Axios instance inside useAPI composable. So first let's import it. Now let's create a function named useAPI. The function will return Axios instance. Now I will write some interceptors for Axios instance. So the interceptors are used to modify Axios requests or response before actually sending them. So for example, if I use a request interceptor, before sending the request, I will make some modifications in terms of configuration to Axios. And if I use Axios response interceptor, it means that based on the response, we will again modify the configuration of Axios. So we need interceptors because we are using authentication in our application. And based on the authenticated user, whether that user is authenticated or not, we will work with some tokens and stuff. That's why we need to configure Axios headers based on the requirements of requests and response. I will first start by creating a request interceptor. So I will create request intercept variable. And I will also need one response intercept. Inside interceptor, I will acquire two variables. So first is config, and the second one is error. So it is obvious by the name that config will be used to configure the Axios instance, and error will be used to make further configuration whenever an error happens. So the first arrow function will return config at the end. And the second function will return a promise. For now, I will keep it empty. Now let's move into response interceptor. It is also similar to request interceptor, but in this case, the first function will contain a variable named response. And it will actually return a response. That's why I can write it like that. And I can remove brackets. The important part of this response interceptor is error part. So we create an async function with error parameter, and at the end it will return a promise with error. We don't actually need the variables, so we can delete them. We will work with the user data inside our interceptors. That's why we need global state. Now let's call Auth store. And let's import it. Now inside request interceptor, we have to check if we have authorization header set. If not, then we have to set authorization header to access token. Now here we set the authorization header to bearer with access token, but actually we don't have access token state inside Auth store, so we need to create it. Here let's add another parameter named access token. And that's it. Now we're done with the request interceptor. Now let's move into response interceptor. So in our system, normally if the response is success, then we will just forward the response. But if we got an error response, so we need to make a little bit changes to the Axios instance. So for instance, if we receive 401 status, which is saying not authenticated, then we need to use our refresh token to get another access token and set authorization header to that access token, and then send the previous request again. With that being said, let's start working with the interceptor. We need to first access the error request configuration. We need to check the response status against 401 and 403. We have to set previous request.send to true. Then we need to call the refresh action of store, and we will get new access tokens. Then we will fill the authorization header with new access token. And we will return Axios instance with previous request as an input. I would like to put interceptors code inside watch effect hook of Vue, because when we use watch effect, it will reactively trigger any functionality inside it based on the dependencies in the code. So in our interceptors, we are using access tokens. So it means that whenever access tokens are changed, watch effect will react as interceptors inside watch effect will react according to that. For now, we're done with use API composable. Now let's move into actions of store. Let's import use API composable. I will open a try catch block and I will call the API. Now, based on the data we get from backend, we will change the states. So we will first start with login action. When we get data from server, we will get access token from login route. So when we get access token, we need to assign it to state. So we will say access token, this.access token equal to data access token. When we register, we don't really get any valuable data from the server. We just get the status 201. That's why we don't need to modify any state. When we get user data, we have to change this user state. So this.user will be equal to data. When we log out, we will set the access token to null and user to empty object. In refresh action, we will set access token to null. Access token to new access token. Before moving forward, we see that we have some errors here. So this is because use API has extension .js. Let's change it to .ts to make it a TypeScript file. And let's change axios.js to axios.ts. Now let's continue building register view. Let's create a reactive name login data. And its type will be equal to login data interface from store. And its attributes will be email and password, which are empty strings. We also need submit function to submit the form. And this submit function will call register action of Auth store. and input for this action will be register data. It seems that I made a mistake. The reactive name should be register data, and its type should be register data as well, and it should contain username and confirm password fields as well. And remember that register action will return a promise to us. And based on that promise, we will do some other actions. If we successfully register, then we will redirect ourselves to login page. So for this we need router. If we catch an error, we will set an error message. It seems that I forgot to add username and password confirm to register data. Probably it has the same parameters as login data interface. Let's correct this mistake. Now we can continue our work with form. Now when this form gets submitted, we will call submit function here. So username field will be bind to register data.username with vModel. And email field will be bind to email. And the same is true for password and password confirm. Now first let's test our form, if the form is working or not. Let's run our application. I'm in register page now and I will test the form. So we got our data: email, password, password confirm, and username. Now I will copy and paste the same code to login view as well. Now I will continue building user page where we get the user data. I will create a computed value named user. And this computed value will return store user data. And now I will continue with Navbar to also show authenticated user data and logout. So I will copy and paste the code from user view to Navbar. I will create another computed value named isAuthenticated. And I will write an if state to check if the user is authenticated. If yes, I will show the user data. If the user is not authenticated, then I will show login and register links. If we click logout button, then we will trigger logout function. And it should be async function. And we also need the router to redirect to home page if we are not in the home page. Now I remember that I didn't call getUser action inside user page. So we will not be able to get user data unless we call that action. Now before testing our pages, I found out that I made a mistake here. So it says that post doesn't exist on type Axios instance. So we need to include brackets in order to be able to use post method for use API composable. So I will include brackets for all use API instances. And now it seems we're good to go. Now we're gonna first check register page. Let's create a user. Now we got an error. It says that access to the resources are blocked by course policy. So probably we have some problems with the course origins. Let's see how we can solve it. Right now I'm in allowed origins file inside our server directory /config. So here we have to include the origin of API endpoint of our frontend application, which is this URL. And inside credentials middleware, we need to change request.headers.origins to request.headers.origin. It was a typo. And we also need to add response header access control allow credentials to true to allow the credentials coming from the client application. Now let's test register page again. Okay, now we got an error from backend. It says invalid fields. This is because we haven't sent first name and last name. Now I am inside in register view and I will add those fields as well. We also need to add those fields to register data interface. Now let's test register view again. We are redirected to login page. Now let's see what response we got. So we got response created. It means that register request had worked. Now here I see that the title of this page is wrong. It should have said login instead of register. Let's change it. If we successfully log in, it should redirect us to user page. It redirected us to user page, as we see from the URL. Now let's see what response we got. We got our access token as a response, and we see that we also got user data, but we don't see it in our front end. Let's see what problem we have. So it seems that the problem was in getters. You can see that the state is equal to getter in our case. Both have same value, the same object user. But in fact, a getter should not be equal to a state. That's why I will change the name of getter to user detail. And here I will call user detail in the computed variable. Now let's log in again and see what we got. We see our name in navigation bar here, but we don't see our details inside user page. So instead of using async setup, I removed async and I used onMounted lifecycle hook to call getUser method. Now let's test it again. Now we see our data: username, email, first name, last name, and we can actually also see the full name, because if you remember, we had that field as well. We can add it to user interface here, but as an optional field. Now, if we refresh our page, we will not be able to see user data because we lost our token when we refresh the page. And because we lost our token, we will get error 401, name unauthorized. So we need a way to persist authentication. What I mean by that is we need a way to get authenticated user data in every refresh before the project is started up. So for this purpose, we will use refresh action inside Auth store, and also we need to call that action every time before the page is loaded. To accomplish this, I will write a plugin. I'd like to create another action named attempt. So this action will do two things. First, it will run refresh token. First, it will trigger refresh action so that we can get a new access token, and after that it will run getUser action, so to get user data. In source folder, I will create plugins folder, and then I will create authentication.ts file. I will export a constant named authentication. The authentication object will have an async install method. Here we will first access Auth store. Now I will call attempt action of store. Inside main.ts file, I will call that action. So let's first import it. Here under create PNIA, I will call my plugin. And I will put router and app mount inside the promise of that plugin. So whenever install method of my plugin triggers, after it is ready to serve the promise, it will then activate router and it will mount the app. Now we have to solve a major problem before we continue with our project. The thing is that we're using this use API composable for all the actions inside our stores. The problem is that when we don't have any access token inside authorization, we will get 403 or 401 status error. And then we will run the refresh action, and then after that we will run the previous request again. So if we don't have any access token, in which case it means that we are already logged out and we don't have any. So this may cause a problem if we logged out from the application, because in that case all the cookies will be cleared on server side and we will not have any refresh token. But as we are persistently requesting the backend for getting a new access token by using refresh action, we will not get any access token. Instead, we will get only error responses. And this will continue in a loop endlessly until we get an access token. But in fact, we will not get any because we don't have any refresh token in the cookie. So that's why for some routes, it will be necessary to use another composable, another Axios instance. So for that, I will create another API composable and I will name it use API, which is the same as the previous composable. That's why I will rename the previous composable to use API private. And it will not be a default export. And here we will not do too many operations. We will just return Axios instance. Now we are returning same instances in two places. That's why we need to change the return inside use API private. We will not return Axios instance. Instead, we will create another instance for that. So inside axios.ts file in utils folder, I will create another instance named Axios private instance. They will both have the same parameters, and let's include it inside use API composable. And instead of Axios instance, I will return Axios private instance for use API private. And inside stores file, I will change the import line. So you may ask that which actions should use API and which actions should use API private. So it is obvious that login and register have to use API, because use API private is meant for the routes which actually requires access token and refresh token in the cookie. That's why we're going to use API for these actions. So getUser have to use API private because it has to have a access token on authorization header and also refresh token on the cookie. Logout also requires use API private, but refresh action do not require use API private. Instead, we have to use API composable. In login action, after we get the access token, let's call getUser endpoint. So getUser will get the user data and set user data. Now I'm inside index.ts file in router folder. Here I will declare my navigation guards for login page, register page, and user page. Here I will declare a meta field, and it will have a parameter requires guest to true. And the same will be implemented for register route as well, but the user route will have requires auth equal to true. So the difference is that requires guest should only allow guest users to enter these routes, and requires auth should only allow the users who are authenticated. Now I will create a navigation guard. And I will check if the route we are going to requires auth. So first we check if the route requires auth. If yes, then we will redirect it into login page, and if the route requires guest user, we will be redirected to home page. Here I included query redirect to .full path. This means that it will save the previous URL, and if we log in, we can come back to that route later. So here I have to access the authenticated user to see if user is authenticated or not. That's why I will call the store and I will check. If user is not authenticated. If the user is not authenticated, but the page requires authentication, we will be redirected to login page. So the actual logic should be if route requires guest user and user is authenticated. In that case, we will be redirected to homepage. It seems we're done. Now let's test our application. I will start the client and server. Now I'm inside user page. Let's refresh the page. We see that on each refresh, we again can access the user data. Now let's log out. And let's try to access the user page again. We see that we are immediately redirected to login page. Now let's log in. Now we are redirected to user page. Now let's access the login page and register page. We see that when we try to access login page, we were redirected to home page. Now let's test the same thing for register page. We see that the same thing happens in case of register page. So that was the end of our tutorial series. If you want to see more of these contents, please subscribe to my channel.